Hi, my name is Dwayne Gathers, and welcome to CivitasLA, featuring diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating a community every day and building a better tomorrow. These bi-weekly conversations truly enable us to hear from, learn from, and be inspired by a diverse array of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward in making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Our goal, as always, is simple: to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement across the greater Los Angeles region while elevating diverse and emerging voices in that conversation. Noted author, business consultant, and motivational speaker Ken Blanchard, who writes often on leadership, stated, "Leadership is very important. Leaders have a major role in setting the vision to move towards the organization's goals, and then creating a motivating environment for people so those goals can be reached. But boy, leaders who don't know what they're doing or have big egos can take a good company or organization and drive it straight into the ground. So don't kid yourself. Leadership does matter." With that, and with us in studio today, is someone who clearly knows what she's doing. For nearly 3 decades, Lorri Jean has led the Los Angeles LGBT Center. Over that time, her leadership has seen the organization grow from a transformed motel on Highland Avenue in Hollywood and a budget of just under $8 million to an organization that now counts nearly 800 professionals, a budget of nearly $150 million, serving community over 10 locations, including its bustling new 2-block campus in the heart of Hollywood. More importantly, Lorri Jean is simply recognized as a force of nature, one of the most seasoned and effective LGBTQ+ leaders in our country. So as she prepares to step down from leadership and retire, CivitasLA is unbelievably delighted to celebrate this Pride Month with Lorri Jean. Lorri, welcome to CivitasLA and happy Pride.
Well, thank you, Dwayne. Happy Pride to you, too. After that introduction, I may not be able to get my head out of the doorway when we're done.
Well, we are thrilled by all that we've achieved in nearly 2 years on CivitasLA, but I can tell you this is probably our first conversation with a true legend. So thank you for being with us today. Lorri Jean, on CivitasLA, we always appreciate it if our guests can offer a brief personal introduction to yourself and the organization.
Okay, well, I'll start with the personal stuff. I'm a farm girl from Arizona, grew up with loving parents and siblings, and went to Arizona State to do my undergrad, and then I thought I should get the Eastern experience, so I headed east to Washington, D.C., and went to Georgetown University Law Center. I stayed in D.C. for 10 years, practicing law with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and then they promoted me to come and be the Deputy Regional Director of their Western Region, FEMA Region 9, and that's where I was when the center tried to recruit me in 1992, and it did recruit me. I didn't really know much about the center, but I learned a lot about it, and I ended up here in late 92, starting at the center in 93 with my wife in tow. Of course, we weren't married then. Gina Calvelli and I just celebrated our 30th anniversary.
Outstanding.
And talking about the center, it is the largest and most amazing LGBTQ organization on the planet. Our founders began providing services in 1969, and they were an all-volunteer organization, and you gave some of our stats today. Today we have 800 staff doing vitally important work, 10 locations, a budget of $155 million, and we're helping people at a rate of more than 50,000 client visits a month. At least those are the pre-COVID numbers.
Sure.
But I am stepping down on July 1, and my successor, the incoming CEO, Joe Hollandoner, has already taken the reins. We've been overlapping for about a year. He's doing a great job, and he's going to lead the center on the next stage of his journey.
Amazing. So, Lorri, you've had a distinguished career in LGBTQ advocacy, but I'm really fascinated by your start in government, your time in government before joining the center. You were the first woman and probably the youngest person at the time in leadership at FEMA and in the West region. How did you get interested in disaster management to begin with?
Well, I really had no interest in disaster management. I did have an interest in finding a legal job.
Okay.
And when I was looking for a job as a lawyer after I did my judicial clerkship, it was during the Reagan administration. And I had wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. And Reagan had allowed the Equal Access to Justice Act to lapse. And that was the law that gave civil rights attorneys the ability to recover attorney fees. And without it, civil rights firms were folding left and right. So I heard through the grapevine that there was this brand new federal agency that was looking for a lesbian lawyer.
Okay.
Well, I couldn't believe it. This was 1982 or 1983. And it turned out there was a closeted gay man in the Office of General Counsel who had a goal of filling their one vacancy with a lesbian. And there was a little bit, a nest of liberals there. So I went to work with them. They promised me great experience. And in 6 months, I was arguing a case in the United States District Court. And I had friends who went to big fancy law firms, and they didn't see the inside of a courtroom for years.
Sure, yeah.
So that's sort of how I ended up there.
Okay. But, not suggesting that the center was a disaster, but somehow you got lured to move down from San Francisco to take over this role leading the L.A., at the time, L.A. Gay and Lesbian Center. So this is the early 90s. What compelled you to make this move and take on this new challenge? Well,
I've liked to joke over the years that disaster management was perfect preparation for queer movement work.
Okay.
But, when I was back in Washington and in my few years in San Francisco, I was working for FEMA full time, but in my spare time, I was doing activism on behalf of the LGBTQ community. And in time, I realized that I was finding a lot more fulfillment in that than I was in being a lawyer.
Right.
But back then, the salary scales were so horrible in the movement that if I was going to be able to repay my law school loans, I had to get one of the top jobs at one of the big organizations. And I knew that if that was going to happen, I needed to have some experience that was really going to make me the most competitive candidate.
Sure.
And so when I was in Washington, I went to the head of FEMA then, who was the first African-American 3-star general in the Army, General Julius Becton, and he liked me a lot. And he was afraid of losing me, and he asked me what would it take to keep me. So I very brazenly asked for that job in the regional office, and damned if they didn't give it to me.
Outstanding.
So that's where I was when the center began trying to recruit me, which they were doing with a number of candidates, because I had been, as I said, an activist in my spare time. So I applied. All my friends in San Francisco were appalled at the thought that I would consider Los Angeles.
How dare they?
And I came down here and I met the people who were involved with the center. I saw the new building that was getting ready to open, and I was blown away. I knew there was nothing like this in the LGBT world anywhere. And, so many other places think they're the center of the universe when it comes to queer activism. New York, San Francisco, even Washington, D.C., where I cut my teeth. But L.A. has built the most amazing institutions in our community on the planet, and I had to be a part of it. Thankfully, they offered me the job, and here I came.
Yeah. And, this is 1992, 1993, so we're in the height of the AIDS crisis. Give me a state of the organization and of the community, particularly in this region, as you found it and began this journey at leading the organization.
Yeah. Well, everybody in our community, both here in Los Angeles and all over the country, was overwhelmed with the scourge of AIDS. It was the number one cause of death among adults in the United States when I started at the center. And in the previous 8 years, particularly in Washington, I lost count of the number of friends I lost to AIDS. Men cut down in the prime of their lives. Men I thought I'd grow old with. And so when I came to the center and everybody was still trying to deal with that was one of my major motivations. And having been in D.C., I saw the cowardice and the bigotry of Presidents Reagan and Bush when it came to dealing with the AIDS pandemic. Anthony Fauci was one of the few bright lights back then. And so our community had to create our own means of taking care of each other. And the center gave me the perfect place to ensure not only that that continued, but that it grew.
Mm-hmm. And, over time, the center, and especially Gould Plaza itself, has really been a focal point for convening and organizing and engaging on critical issues affecting the community on every imaginable issue. And you've been front and center in all of these key battles. In your view, what are some of the signature battles won or even lost, and the impact that the center had on these issues?
Well, there are several that come to mind. Some were national battles, like the gays in the military battle and the freedom to marry. And then we had several local battles that were crucial. The first one I faced, of course, was the gays in the military fight. I arrived in the job on January 1, 1993. Clinton had just been elected and was about to be inaugurated. And he was the first president elected who had actually actively courted the support of the LGBT community, especially here in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And so he decided, without really consulting with his queer friends, to try to end the ban on gays in the military. And that ended up being a fiasco. Mm-hmm. We lost, of course. It resulted in the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which would take 20 years to repeal.
Sure.
I was involved in leading the local coalition that was fighting that battle. Mm-hmm. And while we lost on the issue, it was a total win, in my judgment, for our broader community and in helping to bring society along. That was the first time in the history of the world that you could not turn on the television, the radio, read a paper or a magazine, and not see something about LGBT people. And that had never happened before. So in that regard, it was an ultimate win for us, even if we lost the particular issue. Of course, the freedom to marry was something that also started in the mid-'90s when the Hawaii case began working through the courts, handled by Lambda Legal. I had been co-chair of the board of Lambda Legal before I came to the center. And so our center was the first organization to join forces with Lambda and to start educating our community about what was happening in Hawaii, getting people ready. I don't think anybody anticipated at the time the national backlash that we were going to have with anti-gay marriage laws all over the country. But we got very involved here. I helped persuade the leaders of other national organizations to join the fight. People were pretty skeptical about it back then. And here in LA, our local Freedom to Marry coalition coined the term freedom to marry. Mm-hmm. And then that became the national terminology that was used. And of course, it wasn't until another 20 years before the United States Supreme Court, in its Obergefell decision, made marriage the law of the land. Of course, as we sit here today, we know that's in danger. If the leaked opinion repealing Roe versus Wade actually becomes a formal opinion by the Supreme Court, I believe that puts our rights very much at risk. Mm-hmm. Of course, LA is a really critical city when it comes to our national movement. All the national queer organizations come here to raise money. We have donors here who have enormous influence with elected leaders. Plus, we have one of the largest congressional delegations in the country. So what happens in LA is really important. And we've also had a lot of local battles here as well. Some that involved, for example, the LAPD, like them mounting entrapment operations, trying to arrest gay men, or their affiliation with the discriminatory Boy Scouts of America. So we worked very hard to get them to stop those kinds of operations and ultimately to disaffiliate with the Boy Scouts of America. We also have had a raging STD epidemic in Los Angeles and all over the country. Occasionally, our Department of Public Health leadership has not been where we wanted them to be on that. So we've had to mobilize our community. And then we've also faced horrible lack of funding for LGBTQ youth in foster care. Our groundbreaking study of the foster care system here showed that a huge percentage of the youth in the foster care system are LGBTQ, and yet there have been no services directly for them for many, many years. So we've had to fight that battle.
Well, that's a great segue because certainly, the LA LGBT Center has played a key role in advocacy. But as you just talked about is the issue of services. And over these past decades, you've built up quite an organization providing really crucial and ever-expanding services to meet the much more diverse needs of the community. So can you highlight some of the key programs and services that you do offer?
Sure. Our largest program is our medical care program. Started as an AIDS clinic. We became a federally qualified health center about 14 years ago or so. We were the first and may still be the only in the nation that was specifically approved actually to serve the LGBT population. Our second largest program is our youth services program, and that involves housing for youth experiencing homelessness, a wide range of programs for not just the youth who are living with us, and we have several hundred of them that are living with us, but hundreds more that are living on the streets but who count on us for 3 meals a day and help getting a job or finishing their high school education. And we also have a bunch of kids in college that we're supporting. We operate a charter high school. That program is crucial and one of the ones that so many of our donors very much value. One of our fastest growing programs is our seniors program, because now we're experiencing the generations of LGBT people who were the first ones to sort of be out of the closet. And we know that their needs are pretty dire. And at the same time, for years, the center was just located in the Hollywood area. And over the last 10 years or so, we have dramatically expanded to Boyle Heights, Koreatown, Leimert Park, West Hollywood, even though most of our locations still remain in Hollywood.
Well, I know you mentioned as well that you're up to nearly 800 professionals in 10 locations, and you were getting roughly 50,000 visitors per month. How were you impacted by the pandemic, and how is the organization positioned going forward?
Well, this is our second pandemic. Living through the AIDS epidemic, we learned a lot that was really valuable for us when COVID hit. But COVID has been extremely challenging because it's been a very different kind of pandemic. About a third of our staff are frontline essential workers, so they have been on duty since day one. The other 2/3 began working remotely, and we had to figure out how they could provide their services remotely. We had to cancel all of our fundraising events, and part of my job was to figure out how in the hell can we make it through this without laying off people and adding to the roles of the uninsured and the unemployed. And I'm very, very proud that we did not have to lay off a single person so far. We had to develop new programs given pandemic-created needs, like the Pride Pantry, which is our new food bank, which is offering boxes of food to more than 400 families every single week. And it has been especially difficult for youth and seniors. Seniors who are so vulnerable health-wise became extremely isolated, and so we began delivering programs and services directly to them at their homes. Youth who had to comply with the public health requirements, but couldn't come in and get the kind of support that they needed because we had to close because of capacity issues. The Department of Public Health required it. So we've faced a lot of challenges. We never gave up. As soon as it was possible, every center employee got vaccinated so we could make sure that we were keeping each other safe and keeping our clients as safe as we could. And of course, the challenges of COVID are continuing.
Continuing on with, programs and services, I know you've launched a number of initiatives with LAUSD. Can you speak to those efforts in the schools here?
Yes, one of our first big initiative with the LAUSD during my tenure anyway was we were experiencing a number of very high-profile suicides of LGBTQ youth in this area. And I just thought we can't keep doing everything the same or as we've been doing it, or we're going to have more. So I picked up the phone and I made a cold call to Monica Garcia, who was then the president of the school board. Yeah. And I asked to meet with her. She said yes. And I proposed to her that we work together to develop a program for the LAUSD that could help end suicidal ideation among LGBTQ youth. And she was a little shocked by that idea, but immediately on board. One of our first programs was the Out for Safe Schools program, which we've now taken national. And what we wanted to do was offer credentials to all LAUSD employees, teachers, administrators, janitors, bus drivers, that they would wear on around their neck with their normal IDs that said Out for Safe Schools and would identify them, it was a big rainbow credential, would identify them as a safe space for queer youth.
Wow.
And so the LAUSD agreed. We printed, I think, 4,000 of the badges and hoped we would use them all. We had requests for like 60,000 badges.
Wow.
It was astonishing. And we've now taken this program national. It's in school districts all over the country. And at least it lets both queer kids know and other kids who might want to bully LGBTQ kids that there are lots of people that they can see with their own eyes everywhere who are going to step in and be allies.
And certainly while you've grown this program nationally, you've also grown your work internationally. And I recall a couple of years ago you launched an initiative in China. Can you speak to that program and how that's evolving?
That started in 2008. And China's movement was just sort of getting going. And a lot of the young activists had no experience in how to build organizations and networks of volunteers. And, of course, how things work in China is completely different. So we started this program bringing groups of people here to immerse in our work for 6 weeks with the deal that they would learn everything they could and then go back to China and figure out how to implement initiatives that would advance the cause of freedom and equality in China. And at the time we started, there was one person doing full-time LGBTQ work in China. Now there are over 100, and they're virtually all of our graduates. We've taken delegations to China to reach more people. But of course now in China, as is happening here and in other places around the globe, the right wing is ascending, and they're cracking down on LGBTQ organizing. And so it's quite a challenge for our graduates, but we just had a bunch of them here to sort of reflect on where things are and where things are going, and we're very proud of that program.
And who supports that program? Is it supported by our U.S. government or foundations?
It is. It started with us supporting it with the dollars we raised from our donors here. Then we persuaded the Open Society Foundation to support it. And then the Department of State realized how important this kind of program was to building a civil society, and so they have been funding us.
No, that's outstanding. Well, Lorri, clearly you're doing something right, and you've earned the trust of donors because, I recall in April of 2019, I had the opportunity, to attend the grand opening of the amazing Anita Mae Rosenstein campus in Hollywood, which was the culmination of a significant capital campaign, I think 140 plus million. So congrats on that. And how did you go about doing that? And what does this mean for positioning the center for the future and expanding on services and opportunities for communities?
Well, the Anita Mae Rosenstein campus was the result of a lot of hard work by a lot of people, a visionary staff and board, a very generous donor base, and an inspiring vision, which brought it all together. If we had known how much it was ultimately going to cost by the time we finished it from when we started planning it, I don't know that I would have had the nerve to do it.
Sure.
And that's one of the great lessons of that project, that we can do more than we might ever think is possible if we will only focus, plan, and be relentless in our pursuit of our goals. And it's sort of a metaphor for our whole movement, actually. Yeah. And that program on the Anita Mae Rosenstein campus is an intergenerational housing and services program unlike anything that exists in the country and anywhere in the world as far as we've been able to find. And it has brought more people to the center. At the same time, as we were planning for that, we began our geographical expansion across Los Angeles. And now the challenge moving forward for Joe Hollendonor is keeping it all going, and he's already developing his own new vision. So I'm really looking forward to watching what he and the board and our community accomplish.
Sure. Well, certainly as the community evolves and ages, and you talked about this campus as being a center for an intergenerational campus, you've spoken a lot about LGBTQ seniors. What do you see the particular challenges of that community being, and how do you think the center is going to be positioned to support seniors going forward?
Well, as I mentioned before, our seniors programming is one of our fastest growing programs. And we now know more about LGBTQ seniors than we ever did before. We know they're 4 times more likely than their straight counterparts to live alone and to not have any family to support them, typically as a result of societal discrimination. They are much poorer than we ever imagined, again, because of societal discrimination. So affordable housing is a huge issue. What kind of care they have in their old age is an issue. Even though there are lots of services for seniors, when you're an LGBT senior, you can't really get culturally competent care in most mainstream organizations because they don't know how to do it. And even if they do, often the other residents are prejudiced and make life very difficult. And so people don't want to go into these mainstream institutions. They want to come to places like us. So we're offering housing. We just opened up our second affordable housing apartment building for seniors last October, I think. We have 98 units there, and that's in addition to Triangle Square, which has 104 units, which was the nation's pioneering affordable housing development for seniors. And this is not assisted living. This is independent living.
Sure.
That's got to be a next step somewhere. How do we provide assisted living for LGBT people, especially those who don't have the resources? That's going to be a challenge.
And Lorri, you talked about obviously the growth of the center and its prominence in Hollywood, but you've expanded geographically. So that's really, really exciting because I'm curious to know how you're addressing more diverse populations within the LGBTQ community, but also in communities where these services did not exist. And I'm curious to know, how you've been received in these communities, whether Leimert Park, South LA, Boyle Heights, et cetera.
Yeah. There was a lot of fear when we were getting ready to move into these other areas. And I think it's was very misplaced. We developed partnerships with other sort of locally based LGBT organizations in Boyle Heights. The Latino Equality Alliance is our partner in Mi Centro. We have a whole host of partners in our Leimert Park location and the same at the Trans Wellness Center in Koreatown. And people were very nervous. And in fact, we did a lot of outreach with local community leaders, not LGBT, churches, community-based organizations. And while some were a little skeptical, mostly we have been welcomed with open arms. And the community, our community, has been thrilled to have us in their backyard. Lots of people can come to Hollywood to get our services, but lots of people can't. And now they have these other opportunities to get things in their own backyard.
And what's been the uptake in accessing those services?
Well, it's been impressive every step of the way. Mi Centro has just gone gangbusters since it opened. Same with the Trans Wellness Center. We opened up our Center South location in Leimert Park right before COVID hit.
Okay.
So then that really delayed things. But now it's up and going again, and we're providing medical care in these locations, all kinds of other services. And that is a real growth area for us.
That's terrific. So as you prepare to take leave and step down from your role in a few short weeks, or after this episode is released, it'll be a few short days, share with us any highlights, signature achievements that you're most proud of.
Oh, gosh. You know, I love the Los Angeles LGBT Center. I love our staff and this community, our volunteers, and I'm so proud of everything. But there are a few things that I will always hold in my heart as some of my favorites. And of course, the Anita Mae Rosenstein campus is the most recent gem.
Yeah.
But I also think about efforts that most people don't see, like we have dramatically changed the diversity of center staff. When I started at the center, we were about 25% people of color and 75% white folks with a very small transgender population. Now, we're probably one of the largest employers of transgender people in the country, and we are 75% people of color and 25% white folks. And that's closer to the demographic of our client base, so it makes sense that we would mirror that. I'm very proud of that. I am proud of the geographical expansion and the dramatic expansion of everything that we've done, so that we're now making a difference in the lives of so many more people. The two capital campaigns, of course, the Village at Ed Gould Plaza was the first one that I oversaw. And then sort of the other thing that I love is that we've built so much community support and increased the private dollars so much that we've raised that we have now built the world's most fiscally sound LGBTQ organization. We have no mortgages. We have no debt on our credit line. And that gives us managing that way and that kind of fiscally sound way gives us the ability to respond when things happen like COVID and be able to do new things or to avoid catastrophe. And so I'm proud of that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know, one of the signature events that happens annually is the AIDS Life Cycle Ride. And I know you're such a huge supporter of that ride. And it's actually, unfortunately, it's taking place in a couple of weeks, but by the time this episode is released, it will have taken place. So I know that's been a signature event of yours. Share your thoughts on the meaning of this particular event and how important it is to you.
Oh, my gosh. The AIDS life cycle is one of the most phenomenal experiences anybody can have. I've been involved with it since we started it in 1994. I've ridden 3 times. I've gone along as staff 25 plus years or something like that. And we've had to cancel it for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And this will be the ride that will have just happened, is the first one in several years. And the unique thing about this event is what started as something that was almost entirely LGBT is now almost equally involving straight folks. In the first years, everybody who participated was touched by AIDS. Now we have a lot of people who have not been touched by AIDS, but we come together for 1 week. We become this amazing family of love and support that cycles down the coast, raising money for HIV and AIDS related services. And we become a family that for that 1 week, it's an experience that I've never had anywhere else in my life. Of mutual support and care that people leave wishing that they could replicate that in the rest of their life. So this will be my last one as the CEO of the center. By the time this airs, I will be basking in the glow of a very successful event.
Well, I know, my colleague, Timothy Halligan, who's our program manager for CivitasLA, has ridden in it and has rides in it. So we're going to direct people to Tim's website where he can support him for the AIDS Life Cycle
fantastic.
Ride. So we appreciate his support for this program and for the ride. But more importantly and more critical about the AIDS Life Cycle Ride is, who's going to wear the red tutu when you're no longer around?
There is no lack of people willing to wear red tutus.
So explain to the audience the red tutu.
Day 5 of the 7-day bicycle ride is called Red Dress Day. And it started in the 90s as a way to sort of simulate the red AIDS ribbon along the route. And of course, the queer community knows no bounds in terms of creativity and sometimes in terms of good taste. And so the dresses that people come up with, how they ride on their bikes in those things are astonishing. People really should go to the AIDS Life Cycle website and look at some of these outfits. But my favorite part is that every year you have straight guys who are doing the ride, and they're like, oh, yeah, I can be here, I can work, I can fight for AIDS, I can bicycle with all these gay people, but I am not wearing a red dress. And by year 2, they are out dragging the gay guys. They so love it. It's one of my favorite days.
No, that's great. So how do you view the state of the center and how it's positioned for the future to continue to show up and be a champion for the LGBTQ plus communities?
Yeah. Well, championing our community and being there for our community is part of the center's DNA. It's been there from the very beginning. I stand on the shoulders of countless people who went before me. I and my team do. And that is going to continue. I do fear, though, even though I'm an eternal optimist, that we are going to face some significant challenges in our community. The far right is getting more extreme. They are wanting to take away our rights, and they now probably have a Supreme Court that will be willing to do it. And I fear that in our quest for freedom, justice, and equality, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Mm-hmm. And our work is far from done. So the center's going to have its work cut out for it, but it will rise to the occasion as it always has.
And with that, as we always say on the podcast, we're focused on building community and spurring civic knowledge and engagement, and also elevating and celebrating diverse and emerging leaders across our region. So what is the role that the center is playing in preparing that next generation of LGBTQ plus leaders, and where will the next Lorri Jean come from?
Well, you flatter me, Dwayne. I think the center has a number of leadership development programs. The China program we talked about is just one, but we have our leadership lab, which and our LifeWorks program, both of which are getting people involved in civic activities that are advancing our cause here and across the country. And that, of course, will continue. But, one of the wonderful differences between today and when I started doing this work in the late 70s is that there are so many more people who are doing it, who are willing to do it. People were afraid when I started. Most people were in the closet. Right. Those of us who weren't were relatively few in number, especially if we had, mainstream careers, as I did for my first 10 years. And young people are already incredible leaders. They're already taking the reins in many arenas, and I feel very confident and very grateful in our younger folks because we have a lot of work that remains to be done, a lot of fighting that's going to have to happen, and they're going to take us through that journey. Mm-hmm.
No, that's great. And just also, we always talk about collaboration and partnerships. How is this work and how is the center collaborating and partnering with other organizations, LGBTQ or otherwise, to advance the goals and objectives?
Part of my ethos about how to do this work has always been that we must collaborate. And the center has not always been viewed as a great collaborative partner. In some instances, because it might not have been. In other instances, it might have been because of mistakes that we made, or just because we're the big dog. Yeah. But I think that our partners, both locally and nationally and internationally, would say that we really strive to be a good collaborative partner. We don't have to take credit for everything. We support our sister organizations and sister leaders. And I think that's one of the reasons for our great success. The center threw a big farewell shindig for me and my number 2, Daryl Cummings, back in April. And we had local leaders and leaders from all over the country who came to be there. And I think that was a big sign of how collaborative the center has really been. No,
that's great. Well, Lorri, this has been an outstanding conversation. And, as we wind down, we always like to conclude with our lightning round, which is sometimes the most difficult part of the conversation for some. But this gives us an opportunity to get to know our guests just a little bit through the lens of your Los Angeles, but also share with our listeners who may not be from the region a few insider hotspots, particularly since this is Pride Month. Maybe you can share with us your LA or a few LGBTQ plus hotspots that folks should be on the lookout for. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Well, we always love to eat. So give us a favorite restaurant or two.
Well, I have to say Socolo in Santa Monica, run by Susan Feniger, who's the chair of our board, and her longtime business partner, Mary Sue Milliken. They are so supportive of our community, and their food is fantastic. And my new favorite lunch spot is right here in Hollywood, Superba.
And yes, on Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, they donate part of their proceeds to nonprofits, including the Los Angeles LGBT Center. So I'd say those two.
Let's make sure we all do a shout out for Superba. Favorite place to take a sip, whether that's a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a cocktail. This is I think National Wine Month, so I know you like red wine, allegedly.
Oh, no, my reputation precedes me. Well, I have to be honest. My favorite place to take a sip is on the balcony of my Hollywood apartment, looking at the views of L.A. with wine from our own collection. And we can hardly beat that particular place to take a sip.
Outstanding. We're blessed with so many great places to take a visitor. Give us your favorite place to take a visitor. Or two places. Hands
down, it's got to be the Getty.
Okay.
That is our American Louvre. And, of course, I like the Getty Villa, too. Mm-hmm. It's now is overshadowed, I think, by the larger Getty. But it is a phenomenal location in every respect, from its physical plant, the views, to the collections that it shows. Mm-hmm. Nobody ought to come to L.A. Without visiting the Getty.
Outstanding. Favorite hike or park or open space?
I love hiking around Lake Hollywood. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't even know about it. It's like a little gem up there.
67 episodes, and you're the first person to mention Lake Hollywood.
Oh. Well, okay. It's really fun. Yeah. The dam goes back to like the days of Mulholland, and you see wildlife. I've seen deer. I've seen bobcats. Yeah. It's lots of ducks and turtles. It's cool.
Okay. Give us a favorite community activity or event.
Well, I have to say the AIDS Life Cycle. You asked me about it before. Yep. There's just nothing like it.
Outstanding. Well, that is great. Lorri Jean, welcome again to CivitasLA. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for your service. This dialogue has been outstanding. And as we say on the podcast, the guest gets the final word. Give us any concluding thoughts about the future of the center, the LGBTQ community, or any calls to action that you'd like to share with our audience.
Well, one call to action is, if you're not involved with the Los Angeles LGBT Center and you're here in LA, please get involved. As a volunteer, as a donor, help us continue to do our vital work. And if you're living elsewhere, there are about 250 LGBT centers all over the country. So there's got to be one that's not too far from you. Mm-hmm. Get involved. It's a great way to meet wonderful, like-minded people. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I want you to get involved with your local center, which they are usually the engines of community organizing. And we have our work cut out for us with the backlash that I fear is coming. Mm-hmm. The right-wing extremists in our nation want to take away our rights, and they are definitely at risk. And the more of us who get involved at the local level, the more we're going to be able to effectively fight back.
Mm-hmm. Lorri, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for those words. We are really so grateful for your leadership and your service, and it's been a true honor to have you on the CivitasLA podcast. And we certainly wish you only the best in your retirement. We know you aren't going to be too far away, so we appreciate that. As this episode marks our concluding episode of Pride Month 2022, I want to thank our friends at City National Bank for their strong support of this work and their sponsorship of our Pride Month series. Without them and organizations like them, this work would not be possible. And always, to our audience, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this program, and don't forget to visit www.lalgbtcenter.org to learn more about their programs and opportunities to get involved. We hope you'll join us in 2 weeks as we look forward to yet another great civic conversation. Until we meet again, stay strong, get involved. To learn more about CivitasLA and share feedback on this program, or if you have a recommendation about future programs, please visit our website at www.civitasla.com. And connect with us on Facebook at CivitasLA, Instagram at Civitas_LA, and Twitter at Civitas_LA.